back to normal, Greg. All eyes on Capitol Hill today, where President Trump's new Supreme Court nominee, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, is meeting with lawmakers. Many Democrats already fiercely opposing the new high court pick, but Trump is reminding everyone what matters most when making his selection for the Supreme Court.
In keeping with President Reagan's legacy, I do not ask about a nominee's personal opinions. What matters is not a judge's political views, but whether they can set aside those views to do what the law and the Constitution require.
The White House saying it expects Kavanaugh to be confirmed by October 1st. Ahead of the impending political battle, the Supreme Court nominee is sharing insight on ruling from the bench.
If confirmed by the Senate, I will keep an open mind in every case. And I will always strive to preserve the Constitution of the United States and the American rule of law.
And as we mentioned, liberals are losing their minds over President Trump's pick. Former Democrat Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe tweeting Kavanaugh's nomination will, quote, threaten the lives of millions of Americans, while Nancy Pelosi is vowing to, quote, avenge President Obama by fighting Trump's nominee. And more Democrats promising obstruction. Watch.
The ramifications of this battle will last a generation and more. I'm going to fight this nomination with everything I've got.
If you are a young woman in America, or you care about a young woman in America, pay attention to this, because it will forever change your life.
What is at stake is women's freedom, our freedom to make our own decisions, our freedom to decide when and how many children we are going to have.
We are in the fight of our lives.
So this seems to be, of all the people, the most self-serving person he could choose in order to protect himself from this criminal investigation. To avoid a constitutional crisis, we cannot let this confirmation process go forward.
Okay, so as predicted, Dana, of course, there's going to be opinions. It wouldn't be like liberals versus conservatives if you didn't have a little the ping pong back and forth. So as predicted, they went a little bit nuts. So they would have been nuts about anybody who was selected. However, someone here at this table has personal knowledge and experience of Judge Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
Raise your hand.
I will raise my hand. Do you put you in jail once?
Yes. Lock them up. We spent a weekend in Tahiti.
Well, I guess that'll come out in the papers.
It will.
First, on the idea that Brett Kavanaugh is so objectionable, what's interesting about the opposition is that last night they had all of their signs made up, and then they would take a Sharpie and write in the name as soon as it was announced by President Trump at 9 p.m. So they were like sort of handmade signs. So no matter who was going to be nominated, they were going to face this. I think that Terry McAuliffe's tweet probably would have said, no matter who it was, that this means that millions of people are going to die. And so the opposition is definitely spun up. I'm curious about how that will play out, and I think we'll deal with that in the future in terms of like what Gillibrand and Kamala Harris were just saying right then, how that will play in terms of not just the midterms, but I think 2020 and 2024 and beyond. I do think a lot of it is scare tactics, but that's what a lot of people use. Chuck Schumer is facing a very interesting situation. He has a base that wants him to fight, and he says, I'm going to fight with all that I have. But even with all that he has, because they do not have the power, it will not be enough. So at some point, he's going to have to let those red state Democrats go and decide on their own if they want to vote with the president, and if they want to win re-election, they probably will want to do that. A personal note about Judge Kavanaugh. So I knew Brett Kavanaugh before he was a judge. I worked in the White House with him. One thing I didn't know until he said last night, and I know his wife as well, I didn't know that their first date was on September 10th, 2001. Oh. And it was the next morning when they were walking into the White House that the Secret Service started pulling people out because of the impending danger. They're a wonderful couple. I loved his interaction with his daughters. But I will say that what his job was at the staff secretary's office was to build consensus. One of the worst things you have to do. Imagine, Greg, if you had to submit your monologue to 20 offices and everyone got to take a whack at it, and I was the staff secretary and I got to negotiate with everyone on changing this word or that word. That was really his job there. It wasn't a legal job per se. So the idea that they want to see every email he ever put through in the White House as a staff secretary to me seems like it's not relevant to how he would rule on the law.
All right, fantastic. I'm so glad I went to you first.
Thank you. I'm sorry I took up so much time.
An excellent decision. Okay, so Greg, what do you have to offer? And it isn't reminiscence about Tahiti.
was just thinking about the first date was September 10th. I mean, I'd be worried about the second date. I mean, what could happen? I would just be bad luck.
Like it went very well, and they're a beautiful couple.
This process now is no different than the ball possession in football. So when you have the ball, i.e. the White House, you put points on the board. That means you pick as many judges as you can. And if you're on the defense, naturally your job is to block the points.
Right.
You don't want the judges in there. So right now the Republicans have the ball, and the Democrats don't have the ball. So what they're going to do is no matter who they put up there is going to be not just unqualified, but evil.
Wow,
this is going to be an evil person. And my favorite part is how everybody is like an instant expert on this guy when they never heard of him before. It's like people who became fans of the Washington Capitals when they were in the Stanley Cup. It's like suddenly they knew everything about hockey. But this used to be separate. This whole system used to be separate from politics until one word, Bork. If you remember the hearings of Robert Bork, here was a brilliant mind that was poisoned by political venom. Everything changed with Bork. He was crucified. And I mean, people were befuddled by the attacks on him. And ever since then, I don't think the Democrats were always like this. I don't think the Republicans have always been pushovers on this. But I think that's got to change. I think we have to look at this now, sadly, as a political turf war and fight as hard as possible as they do, because they're going to Bork everybody. Bork was the first time when the media, they broke that political seal. They took a brilliant mind and they destroyed him.
Well, it was
good to be back.
No, 100%. Welcome back. You've been
and metaphors are on point.
Thank you very much.
By the way, I think you've been hanging out with Kill Me because a little bit of sports corner there, sports analogies with basketball. I like it.
Well, I do have can I exit with one fact? Kavanaugh was born in 1965. Ted Bundy graduated from high school in 1965. I'm not saying Kavanaugh is a serial killer, but I'm not saying he's a serial killer.
Right.
We have no evidence, but do we need evidence?
Right.
If he's evil.
Thank you for presenting both sides.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Fair and unbalanced.
Well, unstable as well. All right, Juan, what do you have to say about this? What do you think? We were predicting yesterday, we thought perhaps Kavanaugh, Barrett.
You predicted Kavanaugh, I think.
Yeah, I like Barrett there.
In fact, I was on air. I thought Hardiman was the guy, but I think that actually, some people in the White House put pressure on the president because I think Kavanaugh is much more connected than Hardiman ever is going to be, except, of course, Marianne Trump Barry, I think is her last name, served with Hardiman on the Third Circuit. So I bet she was pumping him to her brother, but I think that the last say really came down to Don McGahn, who's the president's White House counsel, and I think he and others really are tapped into Kavanaugh. And he is the Republican establishment pick, which is why
Justice Kennedy's clerk as well. So that's
he's a Kennedy clerk, just like Gorsuch, right? And I think the problem for Senator McConnell was there's such an extensive paper trail. So it's not just that we don't know much about him, as Greg said, but that there is so much to be found out, because I think somebody said he's a little bit like Forrest Gump. Wherever you look, a big issue, oh, there he was. There he was in the Starr investigation into President Clinton. There he was in the Bush White House in the midst of so many controversies. And there he is on the D.C. Circuit, and on the D.C. Circuit for many years. So when he was nominated for the D.C. Circuit, I think it's 2003, there was a 3-year delay in terms of confirmation because people wanted to know more about him. Some people said he was a political guy who became a judge. I don't know. I don't want to be unfair to him. I mean, you've got liberals like Akhil Amar at Yale who are making the case for him as thoroughly qualified and deserving of the appointment. The difference is, and I think this is something I want to say both to Dana and to Greg in the way that they postured this, that, oh, it's anybody that the left was going to oppose.
Definitely.
You remember that the selection, the list came from the Federalist Society and Heritage. So it's not a universalist to say, oh, give me some qualified conservative judges to consider. No, these are people who the far right has put a stamp on in terms of abortion.
Kavanaugh is not qualified, you're saying?
I didn't say that. Why did you?
Because he was part of the list, you're saying?
No, you're misunderstanding. I didn't say that at all. What I'm saying is these are people who have been pre-screened, Jesse, for their conservative credentials by far-right conservatives.
What's far-right conservative?
As such, I'm sorry?
He worked for Justice Kennedy. He was applauded by George W. Bush as an excellent choice. I don't understand what the problem is. You even have legal scholars on the liberal side and the Democrat side saying that this is someone who's eminently qualified and was a good choice. I don't find him to be far-right or fringe whatsoever, and I don't see any evidence to substantiate that statement.
I don't think there's much doubt that he's qualified. He served on a D.C. circuit for 10 years, but that's not the point in a politically polarized country where, at the moment, as everybody here says, by the way, basically what you're going to have is 5 hard right votes that will control America for a generation to come. And, of course, the people who say, wait a second, I don't want the court to just be rubber stamp. I want a fair hearing. If my case is before the court, I want to know that I'll get a fair hearing.
Yes.
I would say
an election.
I would say that Democratic presidents also nominate liberal justices to the Supreme Court. It's not just Republicans that nominate their side. It happens on both sides, and that's fine, and that's how the game is played. It's interesting to say the biggest criticism against Kavanaugh is that he worked for Ken Starr. I thought special counsels were beyond reproach and beyond partisanship, but that's another story.
He was a prosecutor.
You know what I mean, independent prosecutor. Listen, they've been calling this guy a reactionary ideologue. He's going to end civilization as we know it. He lives in the Maryland suburbs with his wife, Ashley, and he coaches his daughter's basketball league.
Maybe it's a front.
Yeah, I mean, he serves hot meals in his Catholic charity. The guy is not a monster. He's like a polished gentleman who went to Harvard.
Have you tried those hot meals?
I know,
they're terrible.
They poison the homeless people. That's what he's doing.
They're too hot.
Yeah, they're too hot. I mean, the guy has impeccable credentials, and pretty much everybody thinks he's going to be a very, very strong judge. He's got a very long history of decisions and scholarship, and I think that's a good thing, because then you can really see how he is a solid pick. And he's got a great sense of humor, and as Greg knows, anybody with a good sense of humor is brilliant.
He's hilarious.
He is hilarious, and you saw that last night. And people saying Roe v. Wade, he's actually on record as saying Roe v. Wade is settled law, and he's going to follow precedent on that issue. And then politically, if you think about it, I think Schumer can't do anything about it unless some surprise comes up in his paperwork, which we don't know if that's going to happen yet. But you were saying the other day, Manchin, Heidkamp, Joe Donnelly, all Senate Democrats up for re-election, they all voted for Gorsuch. So I don't see why they're not going to vote for Kavanaugh as well. They're spending a lot of money on this pick with national ad campaign advertisements. And bottom line, Schumer comes up small in these big moments. He botched the shutdown. I think he's going to botch this battle with the
Well, I think
court.
Manchin has said that there's pre-existing conditions is something that really concerns him. He says 44% of his state, West Virginia, would be impacted. He wants to know how he deals with that. I think you're going to see a lot of people say, let's get the paperwork, let's take the time, no need to rush it, and you're going to see Mitch McConnell say, no, let's get this done before the midterms.
59% of West Virginians want this confirmation to happen.
All right, we get Dana.
I just want to say, one, you mentioned that this court will rule over America for a generation. And I think that actually is a fundamental issue here with the court. The court is actually not meant to rule over anybody. The people of America are supposed to rule over themselves. And the court has been used by the left as a place to establish long-desired policy goals that they couldn't get done through the people, through the legislatures, through the Congress, and the Supreme Court is all that it's supposed to do is to say constitutional, not constitutional. That's it. So the idea that the court has this much power is not correct.
Well, you add more people to the court.
One could, but one should.
Yeah, exactly.
Wouldn't that be? That would. If I was Trump, I would say let's make it 16.
Well, no, it has to be a 17, because then you want the majority.
By the way, and they've had detailed opposition research. The Democrats have had this, for over a year since he had to replace and fill Scalia's position. So everybody's researched him and vetted him and checked him out. So they can stall, but they can't put it off. They can run, but they'll die tired. All right.